I'm going to try to keep it brief because we're already pretty late. As we said, I'm Barbara Schack. I'm Director of Development at Libraries Without Borders, an organization that works on knowledge-based humanitarian and development assistance. So we work in a lot of countries, but I'm here to tell you the story about one of the projects that we've done to bring everything that we've learned and everything that we do in places where you might not expect us, especially refugee camps. So briefly, it all started in Haiti. So I'm glad I got here in time to know that we were talking about Haiti before. We were there before the earthquake, working on university programs and access to reading with the public institutions, libraries that were there. And then the earthquake happened. And we initially thought that we would step back, but our local partners immediately called us back, saying that this was one of the things that we could do in the middle of a crisis. So we started off with little projects of libraries under tents in the displaced camps. We first worked with UNESCO, then we worked with UNICEF, and we realized two things. What we had set up was also a priority in these contexts. What we had set up was a place where people, individuals, and not victims of a disaster, but people, were able to come and start preparing what would happen next. It was a place where children were safe, were able to play, were able to be free of mind despite the emergency. However, the other thing that we realized was that in an emergency situations, sending books is actually something that's really complicated. Now, when you know that a refugee spends an average of 17 years in a refugee camp, and that there are 50 million displaced people in the world, you start thinking that you need a new staple of humanitarian interventions to start dealing with everything that goes beyond physical survival. So we launched an international call called the Urgency of Reading, alerting the international population, saying, look, yes, food, yes, shelter, yes, medicine, but every human being, especially the human beings that are going to be in charge of reconstructing the country or the place that they're from after the emergency, these are the people that need food for thought. They need to keep growing. They need to learn from what they're living. So we need to have a new staple of emergency assistance. And actually, the response that we had was very positive. Great discussions with the UN refugee agencies that were like, yes, we've actually been thinking. We've got things called resilience. These are the words that we want to be talking about. We have human-centered design in all our interventions, but it's not just because it's a reflex to think about food when there's an emergency. It's also because for 30, 40, 50 years, there's been a lot of research into how do you get tents, medicine, and food in an environment that's a disaster. Well, that same thought process, we wanted to apply it to the tools that you need for learning, for access to information, for playing, for culture, etc. So we took a few step backs. We worked with the UN Refugee Agency on the idea behind, well, on imagining what this could be, and we sent our idea to Philippe Stark, the designer, who worked with us on that all of 2013 to create the Ideas Box. The Ideas Box is a set of 6 water, dust, heat-proof resistant boxes. They're fly cases like the musicians use for transporting their materials around, that unfold into everything you need to learn, connect, play, and create. It sets up a 70-meter square, approximately, space that it can actually be divided up into different places, where you have a heart and a brain. You have a server with preloaded digital, there are better pictures afterwards, with preloaded digital content, as well as access to internet. But even without internet, we've preloaded Wikipedia, Khan Academy, and contents that are adapted to the context where we're going to. So the TED videos we're going to be picking are going to be the ones that talk about where we are. The films and the documentaries are going to be ideally coming from that country. Of course, some of it is wishful thinking, hence the importance of creativity. There is a digital module with cameras, GPSs, everything that you need to start learning about all this different environment. And of course, in a space that is going to all these different contexts, there are also books and puppets and pencils and crayons and a microphone for playing music, etc. Now, this was created in 2013, and the first one arrived for real in Burundi in 2014, where we finished coding the server on the plane on the way there. Yeah, it was quite an adventure, but this is one of them that is in Burundi, in a refugee camp there. There are 4 there for now, and because pictures speak more than words, I'm actually going to show you a video, if it works, of what we actually were trying to do. Last time I did this, the sound didn't work. I felt very lonely. Can I...
On vient toujours de quelque part, ce qui est impressionnant, une histoire. Ton voisin, c'est un exemple, il avance, il t'a prouvé que quand on veut, on peut viser, que quand on cherche, on peut trouver.
Can you hear?
Après l'échec, prends-toi en main et redessine ton avenir.
Les demi du lac Victoria. Les demi, c'est combien?
Je réponds au nom des moulins de la patience et j'ai fui mon pays suite à l'insécurité. Comme dit les droits, l'enfant a droit à l'éducation. Nous sommes vraiment à la carence des matériels didactiques.
Quand j'avais appris que Mandela était mort, j'avais appris ça après 4 jours. Je me trouve comme si je suis abandonné peut-être même dans une sorte de tombe, mais je ne suis pas enseveli. C'est vrai. Je réponds au nom de Kanyuri Massawa Consolata. Je suis réfugié politique. Je suis séparé de tout. On n'a pas accès à l'information et à la formation. Il n'y a pas d'internet. Il n'y a même pas d'informatique.
Mon nom est James Ngabululu. Je fuis des atrocités des groupes rebelles qui se faisaient brûler. J'aime lire, j'aime aussi écrire. Je suis artiste slammer, je suis chroniqueur également. Nos journées, nous les passons souvent à la maison où on déambule juste dans l'entourage du camp sans rien faire. On a changé de vie juste dans quelques minutes. On avait des occupations au Congo qu'on a plus ici. On est isolé du monde. Ce qui nous manque le plus, c'est surtout la culture.
Quand on n'a plus rien, la seule chose qu'on ne peut pas vous enlever, c'est le rêve. C'est pour ça que Bibliothèques sans frontières m'a tellement touché, car c'est juste, c'est très juste, car c'est la première et la dernière chose à donner à des gens qui ont tout perdu. Il faut que tout d'un coup, il y a des gens qui arrivent, qui tombent du ciel, et qui ont des valises de toutes les couleurs, et qui montent une tente, et à l'intérieur de chaque valise, il y a de la merveille.
Nos enfants vont devenir des savants avec ça. On va les comparer avec les enfants de là chez vous.
Demain ou après-demain, notre pays peut avoir la paix. Ces enfants seront utiles à la société congolaise. Ça peut m'aider vraiment, ça doit. Parce que je travaille énormément et je donne les meilleurs de moi-même si juste les conditions sont réunies.
Right. So I'll try to be brief so that we have time for a few questions afterwards, and I'll turn this off. Now, I know the subject of today is the question of innovation in education, and so I'll go briefly through the impacts. Within the first 6 months, the Ideas Box really established itself as something that was one of the best working projects in the camp, because what really mattered was what people were doing with it. And the key elements that we heard after evaluating, well, through a qualitative evaluation of what was going on, was that one of the first impacts that we'd actually not really anticipated was the question of child protection. So having a space where kids are coming outside of school hours during the summer, in the evenings, and they're living exactly the opposite of the education experience they've had so far, which is a blackboard, no resources, and just listening to the teacher. So the teachers are really using it. They come and they have started doing group activities and teamworks and science fairs and learning about sustainable development and searching through Wikipedia and using that to cheat on your tests and things like that. They have started, it has also enabled a sense of community, both for adults but also older or young adults who do not have access to continued education in places like camps. Very, very few camps enable education post-secondary school, and some of them only have school education after primary education. So we have things like hip-hop competition, filmmaking. They actually borrowed cameras to start making horror movies in the camps, learning how to make video, use all these different software to be able to do all these things, and there's blogging and journalism. Basically, I can't do the whole list, but the idea is we had no idea what would happen with the boxes, and we still are really enthusiastic about what's happening day after day. Now, beyond the experimentation location of Burundi, we are working on bringing the Ideas Box in more emergency contexts, especially the Syrian crisis, with 4 million refugees, out of which practically none are in France, despite what everyone's saying. They're mainly in Lebanon, they're mainly in Jordan, and that's where we're going to be working. We're going to be working with Somali refugee communities in Ethiopia, and we're trying to branch out from Burundi within the area where we are, so that we can leverage all the research that we did on contents that are going in Burundi, Congolese refugees there, in the rest of the area. Now, beyond that, the Ideas Box is already preparing to be an end-to-end solution for a wide variety of contexts. Aboriginal communities in remote areas in Australia are one of the places where State Libraries of Australia came to us saying, okay, we have all these amazing projects in our libraries. We've got Fab Labs, we've got preservation of indigenous culture projects where children are making animations according to their grandparents' stories. None of that can be brought in the most remote locations because we can't build an infrastructure for 300 people. So they're going to be using the Ideas Box to rotate between the communities, for example. And what about us? What about us here in Paris? What about all the neighborhoods that we've been hearing about this afternoon and all these different projects that I've kind of heard about? We have an Ideas Box in Paris. There's going to be one in the Bronx this summer. There are more that are coming to France, and we're working on rural and low-income neighborhoods in Senegal. Actually, there's a few that aren't listed here, but these are all these different places that are going to be learning from what happened in all the different communities as we enable all the facilitators of the boxes to communicate with each other, and therefore actually short-circuit us as the nonprofit and work together on what education they're going to be bringing. So these are all the different discussions we're having. And I'll go through a few pictures. I was talking about Paris. This is in the 10th arrondissement, close to here. This is also in the 10th arrondissement, where we've been working with migrant populations as well as children and mixing them up in the same space. And thank you very much. I hear that tomorrow there are discussions about making mobile hackerspaces. There's going to be discussions about mobile science labs. What we really want to say is we've alerted the international community to something that, to be honest, they already knew, which is we need to think about everything that we're thinking for our environments, we need to think about them everywhere, because actually everywhere is where all the knowledge is going to be useful for creating new ideas. So as long as Wikipedia is written in the West, then Wikipedia hasn't accomplished its mission. As long as we're making children scientists here create all these new things, they have so much to learn from their counterparts in disaster areas who are going to be somewhat even more creative because they'll have lived through a lot more things. So this is what we have created. It's just a box until you start using it. What's crazy about it isn't the box. It's what's happening with it. So, thank you.